What if your future self could FaceTime you right now and give you advice on how to navigate relationships in and around the workplace? Because let's be honest, not all of these relationships will be beneficial. Unfortunately, sexual harassment can be a huge problem, especially if you're a young working woman. A recent study found that 42% of young women will experience sexual harassment. 42%. But another study showed that 75% of working women still think that sexual harassment is uncommon. Clearly, there's a discrepancy here. Our next guest is a guide to help you navigate that minefield. She started her career as a Danish diplomat and climbed in the ranks to become the director of the United Nations office in Brussels. As a leader in the world's biggest international organization, she still faces challenges. She comes with 30 years of professional experience, and to put it simply, she's just been there and done that. This is Disengaged. I'm Leah Harding, and I'm happy to introduce you to Camilla Brückner. Welcome to Disengaged. It's so good to have you and to see you in person again since we last met in Brussels this summer.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So when I did first meet you, when you were speaking at the Women in Public Affairs luncheon, I was really impressed by how vulnerable you were and relatable. And you were in such a high position in the United Nations. But you were speaking to this group of women like you were their friends and you were a mentor that you had, like, it's like you knew us. And so where do you feel like that comes from? This ability to be able to like cut through all of this noise and this seniority and meet people where they are?
Thank you very much, because you know what my kids call me? They call me the Ice Queen. So I'm actually happy that I came across, as I hoped I was coming across, as approachable, because I've come across women leaders along my career where some of them were not approachable and others were. And those who were also the ones where I found guidance and where I found comfort in, and maybe found courage to take risks and to try new things and to be believing in whatever I pursued or said was good enough. We are our own worst critics as women. That's one thing that we do share, and much more than my
Why
men
do you think
colleagues,
that
I think.
is?
Well, I think it's the way we are brought up as women. Even if we are brought up in societies where we experience that equality is pretty well established, there are still, 90% of men and women still have biases against women. And it's not just the men, it's also the women. And I've actually been guilty of that myself as well, where I really
How
have
has
to.
that looked for you? Like, in what ways would you say your bias towards women has shown?
Well, sometimes, you come in and you meet a young woman in a meeting environment, and immediately, as a bias, you are not quite sure of her authority immediately as you are with maybe an older male. I just met with a new Secretary General of the World Tourism Organization. It's the first woman who's taking over that post, or she's nominated. She has to be approved by the Assembly, but she's only between 35 and 40, and immediately, is young, very young, but very clearly dynamic and very bright person. I would have maybe many years ago been more skeptical. Whereas, now I think immediately, well, there's a good reason she's been nominated. So
Where
only
do you think
respect
these
for that.
biases come from?
I
They're
think it's subtle through
like, it's
our
down to like
upbringing.
playing with baby dolls, right? Like, it goes all the way back.
Yeah, no, exactly. It goes through that. And even, in my own, I have a boy and a girl as a mother, and I try to treat them the same, or you can't treat them exactly the same, but at least, be fair and equal. But you cannot get away from the fact that there is a different gender. And you are predisposed to react in certain ways the way you've been brought up. And even though you're conscious, you will make those predisposed reactions. And I think that reinforces these patterns. And even though I've been the highest earner in the family for a long time, and also with a higher position or rank, and my husband is perfectly fine with that. But sometimes the kids still have predisposed ideas about who's the more authoritative voice in the family. So, not anymore, I have to say, but as young.
You've said it straight. You're like, listen, it's clearly mom.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's just, it's not that I've become, angry or frustrated. I'm surprised, that still,
Yeah.
despite your own efforts to, make up with these prejudices and then also try to make sure that your kids are brought up in the best way possible to be much more egalitarian or equal treatment of men and women, there are still these, but it's not only from the parents, of course, it's also society as a whole.
Yeah. And it definitely works both ways. And also, it's something that we have to figure out within ourselves as well. And
Hmm.
who am I? And I remember one of the anecdotes you shared was, if you can rehash it, I'm sure you can tell it much better than I, but you were in a bathroom, a public restroom, and you had on a cute little dress without sleeves. Can you share with
Yeah, and
us what happened there?
that was in fact this very same morning I had to give this speech at the event, and it was a warm summer day, so I had a sleeveless dress on, and it was sort of a youngish dress, but it wasn't inappropriate in any way. But a colleague of mine, a more senior colleague of mine, who was visiting, came with a comment that was, could be interpreted both ways, and she says, "That's a very young dress you're wearing," and she could have said, "Okay, you're too old for that dress. You shouldn't really be wearing that." I mean, that could be one interpretation. She could also meant, "Well, you look good," but immediately I started questioning myself: should I wear this dress? It actually led to me wearing the jacket on top of it while I did the lecture. I thought then I can take it off afterwards because I did not want to have that dress distract from what I was saying. I mean, now it sounds like if it was some extraordinary dress, it was not really particularly provocative.
Yeah,
And
you're like
actually,
this.
there
There
was
were no spaghetti straps involved. Okay, there was
no,
the
no,
4-inch
exactly,
rule.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But these things are extremely subtle, but still, there are very strong subtleties in this bias, in this gender bias. And in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs where I worked, I found that this was spoken of. And while the formal rules were very correct and promoting gender equality, in the real, work environment, there were definitely these prejudices that were in the undercurrent.
Can you give an example of some of them?
Well, I mean, one principal of mine, there was some appointment to be made, and the appointment went to a man, and then there was a lot of questions of why didn't go to the woman that everybody expected to have it because she was very respected and also liked because of her style of management. And then this male colleague of hers, more senior than I, said, "Well, we can't have all these loud shouting women running around." I mean, which is an
Wow.
outrageous comment to do in the first place, but to do it in the Danish Foreign Ministry is even more. But it just shows that underneath there is this bias still
It's like
among.
there's a certain amount of women that's acceptable, but too many is too much.
Yeah, yeah, and if especially if they're more vocal, then and why is it not okay for a woman to be vocal? So
Do you
yeah.
find yourself self-censoring in a leadership position where something you want to say and you're like, wait, 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 how is that going to come across? Obviously, there's strategy and then there's self-censoring. How do you balance
Oh
that?
yes, no, no. I mean, I often do that. I mean, again, I said as I often have to hold back in my eagerness to get involved, and of course, you have to adjust your conversation and your engagement as opposed to across the partner or the person you're sitting across. You can't say the same thing to everybody. You have to understand. That's why I'm also saying if you're a bit more curious and understand who you're sitting across, you will also be able to shape your messages and your basically come across in a way that is more receptive to them if you understand them better. I mean, of course, that doesn't mean it succeeded every single time because of course, I've been, as we all have been in conversations where things didn't quite go the way you wanted, and then you learn from it.
But so many women also just, at least women, many women that I know more than men, and just speaking personally, have like dropped out of their careers,
Mhm.
many of them because of the pushback and how difficult it is to be a woman in so many of these environments. And I
Yeah.
mean, you've been in the game for 30 plus years. And like, what is happening with you on like a nuclear level when these microaggressions happen
Mhm.
targeting you, that you're not good enough? Like, Camilla, you need to like chill out. You're an ice queen. What are you doing
Yeah.
here? And which I don't think you're an ice queen, just for the record.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, incredibly frustrating situations where I won't say I've ever been at the brink of giving up, but I've, of course, entertained the idea once in a while because sometimes it was just too tough. So I think there are some basic elements that you should look out for. First of all, share when you're frustrated with others, because in those conversations, you will find that often people have had the same experience and how have they come out of it. And also there, you get reinforced in in the notion that you are not the one that is necessarily impossible or unable or making the wrong choices. So
Like
very
share with a
important.
confidant or with the person that you're irritated with?
No, with a confidant. I mean, either a friend or colleague, and then my tactic with people who have, challenged that is just to prove them wrong. I mean, that has been my motivation, is to show them that they're wrong.
When do you think is a good time for someone to walk away, to leave a situation that is no longer serving them?
Yeah, so I'll give you my own example. I think I also told you at the event there that you referred to at the beginning. I was once working with a think tank here in Brussels in my very early career. It was, I think, maybe my first real job after I had been an intern in the EU. And the director then had a very, what can I say, spotted reputation. And I thought, how bad can it be? He was basically harassing a lot of us. And actually, not only the women, it was psychological harassment on all of us. That was his tactic in keeping people going. But the women, there was this extra, sexual connotation, which was extremely upsetting. I mean, very, very disconcerting. And I thought, okay, I gotta overcome this and simply ignore and work on and not let myself get distracted. But slowly but surely, with the psychological, manipulation, he basically broke us down into very little and convinced us that we were not worth it and made you work even harder. And even if you work harder, it didn't make much difference to his behavior. And he would praise you, but then the next minute he would also reduce you to an absolute nothing. And at some point, everything in my life was affected by this, and I lost confidence in everything I did. Because once you are towards such a person, which is my very psychopathic behavior, then there is very, very little you can do to combat that.
And how
And
old were you?
I was 24, 25.
Okay.
And it took somebody from outside, and including my partner at the time, my husband today, was say, look, this is unsustainable. You have to get away from this. And then I decided, yes, I have to get away from it. And realize, I later learned, when you're faced with leaders like that, there's not much you can do. You just simply have to get away, because you cannot, first, as a young person against somebody who's very experienced, it's very difficult. And those personality types, you often cannot win. And research has shown, many studies have shown that it's very unhealthy. So there I simply jumped into a 2 month contract in the EU Commission, knowing absolutely nothing about the thing I jumped into, nothing about where it was going to end, and only because I knew it was a survival of my integrity.
Did you report the abuse?
No, not at the time, because at that time there wasn't a culture. I mean, everybody knew it was going on. I mean,
I feel like
it
in
was,
many ways that's still the culture,
yeah, and it was a public,
depending on where you
it
work.
was a public secret, but it was called out later. Fortunately, the person who also is leading the place now managed to deal with it. I think women are simply just more exposed because it hits more into your bone.
Mhm.
And really crosses some boundaries that should not be crossed in a
I
work
think it's
environment.
also very hard, as someone who's also been sexually harassed for years at a workplace, to, in the moment, be present enough to say something.
Mm.
Like after many years, I only did that a few times because I was like, okay, next time
Yeah,
I know what
yeah,
I'm going to
yeah,
say.
yeah,
I'm going to be like, no, like, you
yeah,
can't talk to me
yeah,
like that, or like, shame on you, or, and I developed ways that I was able to like kind of strengthen that muscle, if you
yeah.
will. Like, I would say things like, would you say that to your wife? That
Mm,
became my,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
my
Yes,
like intro, but it is just so hard in that moment to be
absolutely.
like, gut check, wait, pause, this isn't right. You actually do not deserve to treat me
Yeah,
that way, or I
yeah, I
don't
think you're
deserve to
right.
have you
You
treated that
often, yeah.
way.
No, and often you can't believe what's going on, right? And it takes a little
Right.
bit before it sinks in what's actually going on.
You're like,
And the
surely
typical,
they didn't
yeah,
just comment on my chest or something like
yes.
that.
The typical reaction is, I think many of us have experienced this. Oh, I should have said this, or I should have done that. You realize afterwards exactly as you said, next time I prepared to say that. But then, of course, the situation is a little bit different, and then it's not obvious. Many times, I think you're taken by surprise because you cannot believe that will happen, right?
Yeah, surely not.
And no. So you're not prepared with a quick answer. I mean, you learn that later on with, once you've tried it a few times, you either you know how to step away and just simply, if you're really good, I have found some satisfaction in also exposing these people for their ridiculousness.
Do you just tell colleagues or?
Yeah, or just come with some sarcastic comment about their behavior. But it has taken many, and I still find myself in a situation where I think, oh, I should have said this and not that, because I simply, I'm just not prepared.
Yeah. When you're blindsided by something, especially when it's sexual or demeaning,
Yeah, that's when it gets
it
also
catches you off
it
guard
gets
more.
more uncomfortable. It crosses boundaries that are not necessarily, you know, they're not suited for a work environment. So you don't expect that to be involved, so to speak. But it's very difficult to push back if it's a superior, and especially if it's a superior who has control of your contract. Then it is extremely difficult. And that I fully respect and I understand, but then step away or seek, advice from somebody else on what the best way forward is.
And there are also, I found like lots of with the microaggressions, you can also have micro boundaries. And, if you know that it is also a form of their abuse, but, if they have lunch at this time, well, then eat lunch an hour
Yeah,
after,
another
an
time.
hour
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
Like short band-aided things, not to make your life even more hellacious, but things to buy you time while you seek
yeah.
this
While you
advice and find a
compose yourself,
solution.
and yeah, exactly. Ideally, of course, you shouldn't even have to plan like this. But if it's a matter
I
of,
know.
some time before you can then address the situation, that's the best thing to do. And of course, I mean, in the best case scenario, these type of people will not be allowed to stay in a work environment if they repeat these. I also heard of another example through my cousin who she went to the HR department and said, okay, or she went to the HR department and said, this is what I've experienced. I want to confront that person myself, and then you decide what to do after. I don't know the continuing story if it stopped, but that will be the sequel for the
Hmm.
next. But I
And
think that
having
was
a
very.
paper trail always helps.
Yes, absolutely. And it was very courageous, but as you say, and there were witnesses. So I mean that was also. And then also the other thing is we talk about how you would react yourself if you are confronted yourself with these type of approaches or harassment. It doesn't have to be sexual. It can also be other types of harassment. Is that you as a colleague also, if you see something going on, then first of all, ask the person if they're okay. Ask the person if they need support. Ask the person if you can help them report. Or I think it's extremely important that colleagues show solidarity in these instances because in the end, it poisons the whole work environment. So it's not only a problem for that person who gets exposed or harassed. So while not creating a revolution, because that's also not healthy, then be supportive to that person that has experience and let them say what they would prefer to do and advise them to the extent that they ask for help. I think we can be each other's protectors here much, much better than we have been. And that, I have to say, goes for both men and women.
Are there practical things within your own office that you have set up that you have found to be helpful as far as being more transparent or leading in a different way to allow for this type of support to happen in case a bad egg does pop up?
So UN, of course, is a big system precisely because of that. And back to my point about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Denmark, my experience was that it was more sexist than I experienced the UN. And the reason for that, even though it's a big organization and you have a mix of 193 cultures, there is at least a very conscious effort to set the bar with training, with very transparent and very clear policies about what is accepted and what is not accepted, so that everybody coming from different countries know here in the UN this is where we are, and that's how we deal with each other, and that's how we have to respect each other. So you can say you put it on the table and you talk about it, and it's much more out there than I experienced in my own country, because there it was just assumed that it was known. But yet there was this sub dynamic that was never addressed because it wasn't put on the table. So because it's much clearer here in the UN as to what is expected, I have experienced less of that in the UN, first of all. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, because we are a huge organization and there are many also different contexts, etc. So from my own office and my own team, first of all, very important that you as a leader show what are the policies and draw the attention to them by doing training or by saying, okay, today in this staff meeting, we will talk about sexual harassment in the office, in the workplace. And then there are also online courses that are mandatory to take. So there is at least, a level playing field that everybody knows what the standard is.
And you go from directing your team in the Brussels office to then going home, and you have 2 kids. How have you been able as a mom to navigate that balance or lack of balance between advocating for yourself in your career, but also, you're a mom and you're a wife and maybe you have a dog, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how do you balance that?
Well, let me say that there are periods in my life where it was not balanced at all. And, then you try to compensate by, first of all, making sure that there will always be somebody with them. I mean, there is, an au pair or a babysitter or my partner is there and organize our lives so it doesn't become systemic. I mean, that it is only, the rare occasion that it happens that you don't fulfill what you aspire to in terms of looking after them and being there for them. And I would say to 80 to 90%, it more or less succeeded. I mean, my daughter told me not so far long ago, she's 28 now, so she's a grown woman and she's working herself. I for many, many years felt really, really guilty about a period in my career where I traveled every month and I was away a lot. And I said, oh, I felt so guilty. We were talking over a cup of coffee. I can't remember. I feel so guilty about that period, and I was away so much. And she said, what do you mean? This was the best time in my life. I mean, not that I was away, but, she had a great time at school. She had wonderful friends. There was an au pair she liked. My partner was there. So, and a huge weight lifted off my shoulder. Suddenly, I could get rid of that guilt that I had carried on for so many years, realizing that she had not even, well, she noticed that I was away, of course, but
the guilt you put on yourself was much greater.
She had not experienced that. Exactly.
Melinda French Gates recently talked about being a good enough parent.
Exactly. Yeah.
I thought that was quite profound.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't need to be this super mom every single day.
No, and can't.
You're being good enough.
Yeah.
They're
and
fine.
Even if you are the super mom, they'll find something that you didn't do right. So, being a good enough, it's exactly what the aspiration should be. And I mean, then you have to, of course, I think, also make sure you listen to what's going on at home. I mean, and if there were issues, I would clear my calendar and deal with it. For me, if my kids were not happy, I could not be happy. You're only as happy as your most unhappy kid. I mean, that's really the bottom line. And so even if it's not for them, it's also for yourself to function, because I cannot ignore if they were unhappy. And of course, sometimes it took some time and you have to sacrifice elements of your work life. I spent, for instance, much longer in a post that I would normally have been because my daughter got ill and I had to, for me, it wasn't a question. I mean, it was just, I had to. So
what a balance.
Yeah.
As someone without kids, I tip my hat to you.
No, but I mean, I hope you get there, because it's certainly worth it. And I would, that's maybe another message. I would never forgo having kids because of my career. And I would, anyone who would like kids should not do it because of their career. I did the mistake thinking that if I stepped out just a month, I would lose everything. I think that was a wrong approach. I could probably have stepped out, and I did during my maternity leave, but I was so afraid of getting forgotten or lose my ability to engage in work by being away, and that there's no reason to.
Yeah, that's really good advice, I think, and something that a lot of people don't do because of the fear that they're going to fall behind. Yeah. And a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast are 20, 30-something-year-old women. That's our main audience here. And many of them have written in, or I know are struggling when they realize that they are in something, be it a relationship, a job, or even a friendship. They have found themselves somewhere where it's like they've woken up and they're like, wait a second, I've lost elements of myself. I've disengaged from self, hence the title of this podcast. And now I need to go back home to self. What advice would you give a young woman who has said, my goodness, I've wasted this much time. Who am I? I need to go back. I need to make this bold decision, end this thing, or lean more into this thing in order to come back home.
I think, be honest about what makes you happy. Who are the type of people that you enjoy being with, also in a workspace? I mean, I could never thrive in a law firm or, a big corporation where I couldn't see or believe in the product or, be honest to yourself that what is most important to you, first of all. I mean, if it's the money, fine, then chase them. If that's what motivates you, then go and do that. If it's values that makes you motivated, then find people that you respect and enjoy to be with that really motivate you and that maybe also set an example for you. I mean, many throughout my careers, I have also looked as much to colleagues that I admire as much as, superiors. And therefore, I'm actually grateful today, even though it almost destroyed me, to have this experience with the harassment that I told you about, because I landed in a field that I had not had my eyes open to. It was
So by
sort of a
leaving something, you found something
yes,
even better.
it was a desperate move, and I got this 2 months contract where I had been primarily focused on foreign policy, more in the classic sense, with in and around the EU. Suddenly, I landed in an environment that dealt with development and the whole world and development cooperation. Okay, these two things are also linked today, but at the time they were very separate, and it was also another world. And today, I'm really grateful that I landed there because it opened a whole new world to me. And again, I met people that I could really see eye to eye with. So
It's about having that awkward time and that silence with yourself. I think silence is so important to see what we talked about this earlier, like your nervous system does as it rebounces. Does it have to recover from what you're doing because your body's clearly out of alignment with your current situation, or are you actually being fed in a healthy way?
yeah. And it's also, I think accept that you'll have to test different things. And by testing, you will also find things that you don't like. But that's also a good thing because then you can, you can close that chapter and move on. So not to see it necessarily as a negative, but say, okay, now I know I don't want to do that. It's not my thing. And that kind of narrows the choices, because sometimes actually the problem is not that you don't have a choice, it's that you have too much choice. And that can be sometimes as stressful.
Choice paralysis. It's
So,
real.
and often I find, and this is, I hear many say this, you find yourself in periods where you're looking for a job, you're applying, nothing comes along, and then suddenly you're faced with 3 or 4 offers, and then, then it's overwhelming in the other sense. And then sometimes you have to accept, okay, I've tried this so many times, it's not working out. Okay, I have to recalibrate and look for something else. And I would say, especially for the age group that you are mentioning, this is a time where you can allow yourself to test things. Until you're about 30, 35, you can test. By 35, that's the time when you maybe want to, if you want to be, if you want to rise to a very senior post, then that's when you start um, staying with a direction. And yeah, one more thing. Find a partner that is aligned with you on these things. And if you're madly in love and you see that they're not online with these values of sharing the load at home, then I would say think twice, because it's really, you're not going to change them.
So much energy has gone
Yeah,
into trying to
yeah,
change your partner.
yeah. And I think if it doesn't come naturally, you really have to either set yourself up in a way that where it doesn't matter, you earn enough money maybe to get more help at home, and you don't get resentful, because that's the other thing. You don't get resentful then that the partner doesn't contribute, and be honest and clear about that choice, or find a partner that is there. And for that, we need equal opportunity and equal paternity and maternity leave. So fight for that as well. It has to be exactly equal and exactly mandatory. It cannot be a choice, because that's the way the inequality starts.
Has your husband, before we part ways here, has your husband experienced a level of resentment towards you because your career has been so on?
I think at times, yes. I mean, he's been very supportive, and, also even proud sometimes that, but I also think there are times where he was frustrated. And yeah, I don't think he was ever jealous or envious, but it was more, why? But I mean, he's also had a very busy career. So in a way, Sometimes he has maybe felt that he did his half. For me, that is already, okay, why does it just have to be the half? Well, I never thought that it was just the half. It's the whole, and then it's the amount of time you put into it. And then maybe you have a division of labor, or you agree, each family have their own systems. But it cannot be that parent, and whether it's a woman or a man, says, I have to babysit my own kids. That's not what you do. These are your kids, so you don't babysit. They're yours. You should spend time with them and not feel that, okay, I've done my half, that's it. I clean my hands and then the rest is over to you. Because there will be different phases in life where more is needed, and other phases in life where less is needed. And you have to, I think that most, and here I'm guilty myself, communicate with your partner. Be sure you have honest expectations. And if the expectations are not met, then put it on the table before it gets to here, because that's when things go wrong. But again, life is complicated. So it's a
It
challenge
is.
for most of us, I think.
We're all just out here trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And
The best thing we can do is
yeah.
have conversations like these that help us feel less crazy or encouraged, something that makes us feel more human, I think.
And spend time with other women in similar situations as yourself, because it helps enormously to know, first of all, that they have similar challenges, similar things to juggle with, and similar problems. Then you also inspire each other for solutions, or what is reasonable, what is not reasonable. That has helped me also enormously to share with close friends and women friends.
Well, Camilla, I really appreciate you coming on Disengaged. This has been an incredible conversation to have with you.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And there's still some way to go, but let's not give up the fight to create a more equal world. Thanks for having me.
This podcast was produced by the Anthology Group.